Today's illusionist is hailed as one of Lapeer County's most interesting men in the year 1998. You can imagine he's been carrying that accomplishment proudly for years. He claims that he was raised by wolves, but there is no confirmation or proof of the validity of that story. People say that his best attribute is his wife Jude, coming all the way from Almont, Michigan. Put your hands together for Randy Hall.
They told me if I stand in the middle, this is where the trap door's at. So if I disappear, not my fault. It's just one of those things that happen. You guys should know I was not raised by wolves, but I was raised by some really interesting parents. My mom, and I'm going to be serious just for a second, she was a professional clown. So I was often the person in the audience that got hit with a pie in the face and got to watch all the magic tricks that she did. My dad looked at it a little bit different. He really studied the illusionist side of things. So I witnessed some of these things as I grew up. Now, my dad, he wasn't very good at it. In fact, you know the trick that you saw people in half? You guys ever seen that one? Yeah. Well, my dad, he would practice and practice that. Now I have two half sisters. So that's... Hey, and before... Yeah, it only gets worse from there, so... Oh, I got to tell you, they asked me actually to come out here, and when they announced my name, I was supposed to come out with fire. And I'm like, I practiced thing quite a few times. It blew up in my face. Now, I mean that. I don't have any eyebrows anymore. So I came up with my own. Now, I'm going to start off really simple because I don't want you guys expecting much. So here's my fire trick. See, I can't even light it. There we go. Pastor Kyle asked me not to burn the church down, so I started with that. Hey, could I have Kendra? Would you do me a favor and throw this ball out to the audience? Because I'm going to need an assistant. Whoever ends up with this ball needs to come up here and stand over here by me, please. Somebody's got to get that ball. Thank you, Melissa. I told her, don't throw it all the way to the back and bounce it off the back wall. So, Melissa, I know. Have you seen any of these things I'm going to do here? No. Would you stand over on this side of me here? I'll move this over here. And I will take that. You are not going to be harmed, but I need you to stand next to the star. Okay. Next to the star. No, I'm the star. Yeah. So she is up here because every time you need to hear you do hear the word river, you're going to be the river. And I just need you to hold your arms up like that whenever you hear the word river. So you can put them down for now. And river. Okay, I'm just testing to see if it works. And that works out pretty well. There was once upon a time, a family of worms. And there was a daddy worm, and there was a mama worm, and there was a baby worm. And these worms did river. Okay, it's working. These worms did everything together because they were that type of a family. They decided one day they wanted to have a meal, but there was a problem. They had to get on the other side of the river. And so daddy worm, river, he could get across really easy. And mama worm, a little bit harder. Baby worm, not a chance. Can you guys all say, "Whoa"? Yeah, exactly. Well, so what they thought they'd do, they put their heads together. And they could come up with this idea of how they could get across, but worms aren't real smart. So then they thought they would put their tails together as well. So that's what they did. They put their heads together, and they put their tails together so that they could each get across that river. And that's exactly what they did. Now, so they're on the other side of the river. They have their meal. They need to get back, but it had rained. Can I have you stand in front of me for the moment? Now the river has gotten really wide. River. And it rained and it got wider. And it even got wider than that. And so that none of these They just couldn't get across. They weren't long enough. They weren't tall enough. The one couldn't get across. The others couldn't get across. And the third one couldn't get across. But they had an idea. If you'd hold that one for me. If they could form a human chain, they could get across this river. And that would be so much easier for them as the family, because that's how they wanted to do everything. So they formed this human chain. Now, river, wide river. They could all get across with no trouble. You can put those down. You could stand back over there. Thanks, Melissa. So at the end of the story, they made it back home, but the baby, the little bitty baby, he was exhausted. It was time for him to go to bed. So, yeah, he was exhausted. So the baby went ahead right to the end of the bed, and that's who he was. You can hold. I didn't say river. And the baby went to bed, and the mama went to bed, and the daddy went to bed. And they live happily ever after. Absolutely. Hey, could one of you guys come over here? You can just stand right here for a moment. Come on, you guys. Come on. I want you to know that I have many Twix to do. These are Twix, not tricks. Here's one for you and your wife. Oh, here, I'm going to give you one, too.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Absolutely. And you can have a seat. Yeah. One of the other, you guys ever seen that shell game? He loved that one. They only get worse, guys. I'm the worst for dad jokes. So if you guys ever see that shell game where they move things around, this is one of those there. And all it does is that. So if I'd have had somebody up here, they would have jumped and they wouldn't have liked it whatsoever. So here, I'm going to take those from you. Oh, the poor baby. And I'm going to try, there they are. I'm going to try this card trick. Now, I've been practicing this stuff all my life for the last 3 days. And so since they gave me that one trick with the fire, I'm like, I can't do that one. Man, I'll burn myself up. And so this is a new one for me. And Melissa's going to help me with this one as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut these cards in the middle from whatever card she picks. And when she picks it, she can put it back in the deck. I'm going to turn my back, and I'm going to pull that one out. But I have to get something else out of here in case it goes wrong here. What do I have? An insurance policy?
Okay.
I got this at the magic store. So I'm really excited about this here because I can get a second try if I blow it. So with that said, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to fan the cards, and you're going to tell me when to stop. And that'll be your card. Ready?
Deal.
All right, ready?
Little slow. Stop.
I'm not there yet. Okay, all right, we're going to do it differently. I'm going to shuffle the cards a little bit different, and then you're going to tell me when to stop. You can take that card. You can show it to everyone. You can even tell me what it is. You're going to put it in the middle of the deck. I'm going to turn my back. And then you're going to hold the cards just like this, and I'm going to cut it and pull that card out.
Okay.
All right? Ready? Okay, here we go. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
There's your card.
All right.
All right, I'm going to give you that card. You see it?
Yep.
All right, I'm not playing any magic.
Okay.
Here's your card.
All right.
I'm going to give you the deck. I'm going to turn my back, and you put that anywhere you want. You can shuffle them up. Tell me when you're ready. Okay. Now you hold them. I don't want to touch them again. I just want to cut them one time. What are we looking for? Ace of diamonds. If you guys didn't see it in the back, that's the ace of diamonds. Now, I did this at home 3 times in a row, and I actually got the card. You could ask my wife, and this time I'm not lying, not like usual. That it?
Nope.
That it? Okay, well, one sec. This is where my insurance policy comes in. I paid a lot for this from the magic store. So it says, what?
Second chance.
Second chance. I get another try at this one. So, we ready?
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick the same one. That it? No. 9 of hearts. All right. So there's got to be more in this policy than just that. Where are we at? There we go. It's one of those. We good? That it? What about that one? Hey, right now, we're going to leave the stage, but I'm going to do one more illusion. I'm going to have Pastor Tom up here.
Wow.
We can.
Pretty good.
Hey, William, you help me out and get that. I'm going to see if I can light it up. Hey, everybody, thanks for coming out this morning. Give Randy a hand. I mean, seriously. Here, give those to Randy before I light a match and I burn the place down. But, hey, we're talking about in our series about how we can actually have change in our life from the standpoint that this changes everything. And what is the change that changes everything? And I'll be honest with you, it's really what it comes down to. Obviously, it's Jesus Christ. And so when you saw Randy do some of those things, we understand and our mind connects the dots. The brain says, wow, that's amazing, you know. And then sometimes if you're like me, when I was a kid and watching magicians and stuff like that and had a little magic box and all that stuff, and I'll get to an illustration in a moment, no magic, is that, you know, we had a Christian magician at my dad's church. And so you'd begin to watch all that and you would see it and go, wow, that's amazing. You know, what I saw is one thing, but really what lies beneath the magic trick? What lies beneath that illusion? And what we're talking about today is this changes everything is actually the illusion of control. I don't know about you, but the illusion of control is our topic today. And oh, he's not here. He's just an illusion. Well, I got news for you. You're here. So we're going to talk about the illusion of control today. And so how about you? Have you ever thought about this from the standpoint in your life that you really have control of many things? Well, I want you to understand, when we look at the illusion of control today, we're going to talk about a few things, because really the important thing for all of us to understand in what Randy did, or an illusionist, or if you want to call him a magician, is it didn't really happen. I mean, it happened that you saw it, but there's an illusion to it. And so we understand it's not real. I don't want to spoil your fun and stuff like that, like, oh, you know, that's not fair. But years ago, when I was just a young boy, my dad had a church. It was called Central Baptist Church. We moved there to go to Central Baptist Church when I was like 9 months old. And I was at that same church until Judy and I got married. We served there, did a lot of stuff. But when I was younger, there was a magician by the name of Bill Marks. Now, he did vacation Bible schools for us. He would go to all different denominations and churches, and what he referred to it as was Christian magic. You know, you got to clean it up a little bit, right? But he was an amazing magician. In fact, down towards the Halloween time, my dad came up with an idea, and Bill Marks did, because he was a little twisted and a great, great magician, is that we would do illusions and have a haunted house. Now, this will shock some of you, in the church. And you're like, what? Yeah, he did. And we reached hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I can remember a few years running where they had that, and they would have it in throughout the church, the way the church was set up, and then they'd clean it up. We'd have church on Sunday, but they wouldn't have church on Wednesday nights during the week, because the whole point was, let's reach the community with the gospel. Kind of isn't that what we're supposed to do? And so reached a lot of people for Christ, but he did all kinds of stuff. But I can remember as a kid looking at it, and I knew what my eyes saw. And I'm like, was that real? And then you find out later, no, it wasn't, as you got a little bit older. So I want you to think about that for just a moment. What we perceive to be, and our brains actually says it is so, is many times in our lives is that we actually see some things and connect the dots, but what is it we don't see? So the illusion of control is this. There's a fundamental truth that we have to understand. It's this. Much of the time we think we have control. It's merely the illusion of it. Much of the time we think that we have control. It's merely an illusion of it. Let me just see if I can give you an example. So we think we have control, but it's an illusion. Let me think just a moment. You think everything's under control, and then you get one phone call. Something's on the other end of that phone telling you something. Your life's, the day's going great, or you think you have everything under control, and you found out the deal that you had put together was no longer together. It had fallen apart. Maybe it was a phone call from the doctor's office. Hey, you need to come in. We have your diagnostics. We have your report. Or you're with them. What happens in our lives? What happens, guys, when you respond wrong to your wife? Or ladies, what happens when your husband responds wrong to you? Everything seems to be going well, and then all of a sudden, we lose control. We start going down a path. You see, we have bad behavior that all of a sudden dictates how we're going to feel. The economy, maybe you hit a roadblock in your finances. See, on the surface of things within your life and in my life, everything seems to be in control. But here's what we don't want to hear. We don't want to even see this. We don't want to hear or see the fact that we are not in control, that really there's only one person in control that controls all things. And I'm not saying as a robot, but as one that can absolutely be counted on. And that's why it's called an illusion. So it doesn't mean that you got to stop just trying things. It doesn't mean that you just give up on life. But we have to understand that trying to control things doesn't really work. So I want to ask you a couple questions. How does it work when you try to control your husband? Or how does it work when you try to control your wife? We try to control our kids. Now, I understand we're supposed to raise them up, but there's moments in our life we try to control our kid, or we try to control the behavior of somebody. We try to control the whole circumstance. We try to control what people even believe. There's an illusion that you may think. I've said this often. If you try to convince somebody against their will, they're of the same opinion still. You may think that, oh, I finally won that over, and now they see the way I see. Now they believe the way I believe. Well, understand this. There's an illusion to that. Do they really? When you try to control the situation and you try to control every aspect of your life, things take place. You cannot control another person. Now, you can in some ways, and it's by fear or anything like that, but I want you to understand we try to control people. So let me ask you a question. How many of you are willing to admit, and maybe you'd raise your hand, is that you live with somebody that has a control issue? Who's going to raise their hands? Now, here's the deal. The rest of you did not raise your hands because you were afraid of the person sitting next to you that has control. Back there, I see people, they raise their hands and they're pointing to people. Those are people that are also having control issues. We all have control issues, you know, and the whole thing is that we need to understand. We need to let go. We need to give up that control. So we all have control issues. Instead of giving control over to God, who absolutely can control all things, we seem to prefer with the idea that we're going to remain in control, and we want to make sure that we have control of the situation. Now, I'm not going to get into scripture right yet, but many of you, if you've been in church any length of time, you'll remember a guy by the name of Peter who actually saw Jesus walking on water, and they were kind of fearful, the guys in the boat, and the Lord said to him, "It is I," because Peter said, "Is that really you?" And he said, "Yes, it's me. Come on out." So Peter began to walk on water. So I'll get back to that in just a moment. Here's what most of us think that we're going to do. It's going to be self-help. Self-help. When we think of being in control, it usually kind of revolves around self-help. Here's what happens. You get into a situation and you call out for self-help. Well, your self-help decides it's going to help you because it's you. And so here's what happens. Self-help asks for self-help, and help comes, but here's the problem. Once the problem arises is that now you're going to self-help again to try to get out of the problem that self-help gave you. Now, did you catch all of that? If I asked you a quiz, would you get all of that? No, you wouldn't. But here's the thing. When you're in trouble, do you go, oh, help me, help me? No. What you and I say is, God, help. When we're in what? When things are out of control. Why is it that we continue to go down the road of self-control? Or we need to be in control. And the example of that was what? When Peter began to sink because he took his eyes off of Jesus. And that's what happens in our lives. And we feel that things are out of control. When Peter actually saw the waves and the effects of the winds and the waves, he began to sink. He didn't say, Peter, help, right? He said, help me, Jesus. Jesus, help. So that's where we're at today. We've got to come to the place in all of our lives that we have to understand, and there's a goal today. There's two things with this goal, and I want you to catch this. Acknowledge that the illusion of control in our own lives, we have to acknowledge this, that there's an illusion to being in control in our own lives, and learn to trust the one who is truly what? In control. We have to come to a place in our lives is that there is an illusion, ladies and gentlemen, thinking that we have everything under control. Now, some of you, and I'm not just trying to get after you or be mean to you, but I'm going to tell you honestly, some of you think that you're in control because you've handled your finances the way you ought to handle them. And you know what? There's a part of that you had control of what you did with it, but who is ultimately in control. We could lose all, and would you be in control? Would you feel the same way you feel today if all of your savings, all of your retirement, all of your earnings were wiped out? You'd feel a little different. What I want you to understand is there is an illusion to being in control, and what we have to understand is we have to acknowledge that and then understand there is one that is in control. And I want to bring this to our attention today. So let me read you what took place in Jesus' life. I believe Jesus was the greatest storyteller ever. And in your life and in my life, many times we use things and we go out and do things. But I want you to understand it's ultimately that God, through Jesus Christ, is in control. Now, in Luke's gospel, it says this, and I want you to just kind of track along with me and see where you're at in the illusion of control and who really is in control, and see, and I'm kind of glad that I'm not the only person that's ever faced this. It goes all the way back to biblical times. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered into Capernaum. There was a centurion servant. Now, I want you to understand a centurion actually is this. It's a Roman soldier that actually had command of 100 plus soldiers, okay? So he was in command of 100 plus soldiers. So there's a centurion servant that actually, here's what I want you to understand. There's a servant here that he is wanting to save his life, okay? And he has compassion on him. And here's what he says. He says this, there's a centurion servant who his master valued highly, okay, was sick and about to die. His servant's sick and about to die. And the centurion heard of Jesus and sent someone of the elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. This man deserves, he says, to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with him. So here's the thing. We have a centurion servant, okay? The centurion actually sends somebody. He sent some of the elders there. And this is how you know that he kind of is a man somewhat of a business, okay? A business. Because what he's doing here is that he's actually sending somebody out. He's kind of using his position to kind of leverage the importance here of what's going to happen. And he wants them to go to Jesus and have influence on him. So we pick up in the story in verse 6, in the second part of it, he goes, he, that's Jesus, was not far from the house. So he's kind of not far from the house. Maybe you could actually see him. Not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him. So he's sending friends to say to him. He's sending them out. And I want you to remember this Roman centurion. He never comes out of his house. He is sending somebody. Okay? Never comes out of his house. And this time what he's doing is he's sending some friends. Okay? So most likely some fellow soldiers. We don't know exactly here, but probably not of even of the Jewish community. And so it continues, and notice what it says. Lord, don't trouble yourself. Sends them out. Don't trouble yourselves, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Remember, he never left his house. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. Now, I want you to catch that, because when you think you are in control, are you really in control? Because if you think you're in control, then you're the important one in the storyline. If you think you're in control, you're full of yourself. This Roman centurion, this Roman gentleman didn't even think of himself in a position that says, look, Lord, don't even come into my house. I am not worthy to have you come into my house. He actually is painting a picture to you and me of who Jesus really is and who he knew he was not. Do you follow me? He's very humble in this situation, and he sends out friends. He said, look, man, basically what he's saying is he has the right perspective of where he's at. There was no illusion to him that he was in control. He was sending for help. And so we understand as it continues to follow the storyline. I want you to see this. This is so big. Don't miss this. This is important. He sends them out. And so what does he say to them? I'm not worthy for you to come to you. I consider myself worthy to come to you. He says, but say the word. I want you to catch that. Say the word, and my servant will be healed, for I myself am a man under authority. He says, with soldiers under me, and he says, I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does that. Now, he is a man of authority. And you would think for a moment that if we are people of authority, we would just go get it done ourselves, right? But again, I want to remind you and remind myself is this. When we come before the Lord, I'm not in control. Now, I have control of what I want to do, but I'm not in control of the whole thing. And if I humble myself before the Lord and understand my position, now I am a child of God. I ought to be proud of that fact. But it's not me that's in control. And so he says one thing here that's amazing, and I want you to remember it. He tells them to tell him, just say the word. Just say the word. And my servant will be healed. And it's an amazing, amazing statement, because look at what Jesus says. Luke chapter 7, he says, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. Now, I want to leave that on the board. He was amazed at him. There's only two other times in Scripture where Jesus gets amazed from the standpoint of somebody's faith. Because this is what we're talking about today. What kind of faith do you have? Is there an illusion to how much you have control of it? Yes. But there's no illusion in the fact that God is in control. And so there's only two other times and two different reasons and two different results. And the common thread when Jesus was amazed was faith. And here's a fact that I want you to remember. Sometimes the hometown crowd lacks faith. I've been reading through the book of Mark, reading through the book of Luke, and I come across the stories where it says that the prophet, sometimes in his own town, does not have honor. We get these conceptions over an individual. Many of you struggle many times. In fact, many of you have not struggled because your friends have seen an unbelievable change in your life due to what? God being in control of your life. And so here's the thing, this Roman centurion had an abundance of faith. And I want to continue. Remember, he says this, he was amazed at him, and we continue. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, Jesus says this, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. Then the men who had sent him returned into the house and found the servant well. He never left the house. He sent friends. He honestly, it's a possibility that he wasn't that far away, never left the house, saw these friends of his talking to Jesus, and at the moment they were talking to Jesus, and Jesus was so amazed by him saying through his friends, just say the word and my servant will be healed. That right smack dab before his very eyes, he saw a miracle of God. Because when the men returned, when the friends returned, they found him. They found the servant healed right there. So perhaps you may be thinking this. Maybe you've read this recently, and you might be just thinking, you know what? I just need to increase my faith. If you're thinking that, you would be wrong. If you're thinking that, you would be wrong. You say, why, Pastor Tom? Because when I'm thinking about this, we would say this, well, you know, I should be saying I got to increase the size of my faith. Well, I want you to understand. Here's the key that I want you to understand. We need to increase the size of our God because the size of your faith is determined by the size of your God, and the size of your God will determine the outcome of your life. Did you catch that? Let me read it again. The size of your faith is determined by how big your God is. And so what happens is when our God becomes big and huge and possible that all things can happen with this God, the size of your God will determine the outcome of your faith. Jesus reminded us in the Word of God that if you would just have the faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed. If I held one up here, you wouldn't even be able to see it. So Jesus is saying, if you'll just have this much faith in the size of your God, great things can happen. There was another story in the Bible where they came to the man and he was asked, I need you to heal my son. He's going to die. And Jesus simply asked him, do you believe that I can do that? He said, Lord, I believe you can do all things. You know what he said? But help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. How big is your God? How big is your God? Our God that we serve is huge. He's created the heavens and the earth. He created you. He knows you better than you know yourself. He has so many great things for you. And by the way, he loved you in the midst of when you were not lovable. And by the way, that's probably all the time for most of us. He went to the cross and hung there. Why? Because he conveyed to the world his love for us, and while we were still sinners, Christ died upon the cross. He loves you that much. Jesus asks us over and over and over again to trust him with our lives, and he reminds us over and over again that he is in control. The truth of the matter is, there's been so many times in my own personal life that I've tried to grab control of it. Maybe it's my finances are lacking, or maybe my relationships are struggling. I'm trying to control things, and I can honestly tell you, I am so glad that you and I are not the first people to ever struggle with the illusion of control in our lives. Because we find in the Word of God in Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. For through him, God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can't see. Did you catch that? We saw some things here today that we had a great time with Randy doing a few tricks. The things that we can see, visible, but also in the things that we can't see, the invisible, such as thrones and kingdoms, rulers and authorities in the unseen world. Listen to what he says. Everything was created through him and for him. He existed before anything else. And here's what happens. He holds all creation together. Who's in control of your life? I have to ask the question, Tom, who are you allowing to control your life, lead you, and guide you? Because what Jesus says is this. In Luke's Gospel, chapter 17, he said, if you cling to your life, if you hang on to your life, I mean, you ever see somebody, or you've done it before, you just grab something so hard, it's white-knuckled, and you just will not let it go? He says, if you cling to your life, you will lose it. You think about this as that verse stays on the screen. Jesus came to give life, not just ordinary life, not struggling life. You will have struggles, but he is in control. Jesus came to give you life, abundant life. And how do you live that life? You've got to understand, if you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you let it go, you will save it. We got to get to the point in our lives where the illusion of control is something that we finally acknowledge and understand that it's God that's in control. God is the one who made all of the heavens and the earth. He made you. He can take care of everything. I believe that if we put our lives in the hand of a mighty God, what we find is the size of your faith is determined by the size of your God, and the size of your God will determine the outcome of your life. There's two goals that we have here today, but I want to be honest with you. I thought about this message of the illusion of control. There's been so many areas in my life that I could just pick and say, oh, I thought I had that under control. Nope, that wasn't. Now God showed me. I thought I had that under control. Nope, that's. And I can honestly tell you that there are so many times that I look back and think, man, I lived in a state of fear. I lived in a state of doubt. I lived in a state of discouragement. Man, I felt like I was defeated in many areas. Why? Because I lost control of many things in my life. Whether it's a relationship. Perhaps that's where you are right now. A broken relationship. You never had control of that. Now, you were what? Accountable for showing up and learning what? To commune with God, cooperate with his leadership in your life. But you are not in any way responsible for the full outcome. You could do everything right. Do you believe Jesus did everything right in leading the 12 disciples, but yet one still betrayed him? So in your life and in my life, there are things that, yes, we're responsible with the word that we use it in a way to do certain things, but you're not responsible for the outcome. You're accountable to show up and allow God to work in you, through you, and with you. Learn to cooperate with his initiative. And so the two things I want us to understand today is this. Let go of the illusion of control. Let go of the illusion of control and learn to trust the one who truly is in control. And you know who that is? It's Jesus. Perhaps there's a relationship you need to let go. Perhaps there's some forgiveness that you need to be honest with God and say, God, I have not forgiven some of these people in my life. They have wronged you. They've wronged your parents. They've wronged your family. They've wronged you, and they knew it. But that unforgiveness is going to destroy you, because what you're saying is, I have control of them by not forgiving them. And you know what? You're the one that's paying for it. It's eating you alive. You got relationships. Maybe there's a secret that you need to understand. You can't continue to live a life of secrets because it's going to destroy you by living in darkness and isolation. Maybe there's a habit or destructive behavior that you have. Maybe it's church involvement or church investment. I don't know. But I will tell you this. Maybe it's you today, where you are today, that you need to give up control of your own life and say, you know what? I need to be saved. I need to ask Jesus in my heart. I don't know where you're at in your life, but I will encourage you today. If you want big, big things to happen in your life, then let it go and let the big God in your life have control of your life and take care of it. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had together today. I pray, Lord, that we would understand that if we think we're in control, there's things that we just do not see that are behind every circumstance, behind every situation. And so, Lord, I'm asking that you would lead, guide, and direct. Perhaps there's somebody here today that needs to call upon the name of the Lord to be saved. Lord, I'm asking that you would guide and direct us, that you would have your place of rightness in our lives. With your heads bowed and eyes closed, perhaps you're here today and you need to right now tell God, I am no longer going to be in control of my life. I want to surrender my life to you. Forgive me of my sins, Lord. Come into my heart. Why don't you cry out to God right now and tell him that? Tell him that. Forgive me of my sins. Come into my life and save me. Father, thank you for speaking to us today. And as the band invites us here in a moment to lift our voices to you, may we understand there is an illusion that we are in control because we're not. And may we turn it all over to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.